Commercialization of Digital Therapeutics, Defining Viability.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pilar FERNANDEZ HERMIDA. I'm the founder of iExpand and the moderator of today's panel. At iExpand, we focus on commercialization of health tech, as in, we help companies sell their product. Today's theme of this panel is on target, is on the money. We are going to discuss how can digital therapeutics become commercially viable. And together with me today to discuss this and some more, we have a stellar lineup of panelists. Would you like to quickly introduce yourselves, please?
Hello, my name is George LEIDIG. I'm a military doctor by background, and I'm now the co-founder and chief technical and product officer at Otto Health. We're a just straightforward digital therapeutic for people with tinnitus.
Hi, I'm Nikita. I'm a GP by background, and I lead our digital health portfolio at Viability. And my background's in consulting across healthcare and life sciences.
Hi, good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is José FORTE. I'm one of the founders of Ancora Health, and I've done a lot of things, medical doctor background, but I'm leading now the global business development. We're an end-to-end population health management platform. We have both a DTX arm as well as include other DTX. So I have a bit of a different perspective from the other speakers.
Welcome, everybody. We are really up for a treat here. In any commercial strategy, we always think, especially for new technologies, that it's important to define the field. So let's start by the what and the why of digital therapeutics, because as the name indicates, digital therapeutics as a definition can be a bit confusing. So I would like to pass the first questions to Nikita. Nikita, what are digital therapeutics, or rather, what are they not?
Okay. Good question. So I think one of the first ways it was described to me was think about it as an antibiotic that's prescribed rather than a vitamin that you buy at the store. And I think that's an interesting question in itself. So digital therapeutics, if you technically define it, varying definitions across the world, but general themes are that it's a medical intervention, it is evidence-based, not evidence-guided, and it is a clinically evaluated piece of software that can treat, manage, or prevent a condition, or a condition or disease. Where the differences come in are in terms of risk and in terms of regulation. So when we're thinking about digital therapeutics, it comes within digital health, which are things like telehealth platforms, things like that. Within that comes digital medicine. So we're thinking about remote monitoring, diagnostic aids, that kind of thing. And then we get digital therapeutics. I think, for me, when we think about what it isn't, I think we have to think about the use cases for digital therapeutics. And I think we have to be asking about, does it need to be prescribable? And actually, from a payer perspective and from a provider perspective, what is the digital therapeutic required for? And how does it drive value for every single stakeholder? Because I think that's how we monetize and commercialize it.
Thank you. Since you mentioned the word value, assuming we have digital therapeutics, you have to prove the value in order to be reimbursed and adopted. And my next question could be for Jose, because I know it's something close to your heart. The trick with new technologies is that we need to measure value when we don't have measurements. It's difficult. So how do we go about it?
No, I think that's a great question, Pilar. So I think you first need to think about what is your outcome in terms of a spectrum, right? So, Nikita mentioned when you're talking about vitamins, right? Hospital patients also have vitamin deficiencies, right? But that's not what we talk about. We talk about people going over-the-counter vitamins, right? people at home, they might actually need antibiotics while being in a hospital, right? So what are you actually focused on in terms of that continuum of care? So the way we've done it, for example, at Ancora, is we've looked at what kind of evidence do you need on a preventive health side, right? And then you there still need to split between primary prevention, extremely hard to prove outcomes, right? Because you're talking about 10-year cardiovascular disease. Are there in-between markers, right? Proxies, for example, cholesterol reductions in patients with preclinical heart risk disease. Weight loss as a proxy for what? For the reduction in other risks for diabetes, right? This would be your primary preventive approach. When you're looking at secondary and tertiary prevention, actually your clinical outcomes are not only the patient outcomes, but the clinician's outcomes, right? When you deliver something that you can call a digital therapeutics or a digital health solution in general to a clinician in that kind of setting, it's about, does it cost me more or less time? Does it optimize my care? For the hospital administrator, all of a sudden pops in the picture, right? Is it actually helping my workflow? Is it costing me money or saving me money? And what kind of period? So before you develop and as you're deploying that digital therapeutic solution, you need to have this very well defined, and those are the kind of outcomes you need to show. So in secondary prevention, it would not just be the clinical outcome. Your clinical trial, your assessment would need to be linked with the health economics assessment, right? Whereas if you're doing primary prevention or more D2C, then you can even, you could say my PROMs, the subjective objective, right, could be your outcome. So you just, as a company and then as the person deploying it, you just need to know for your use case, what is your focus, right? And have that in your mind from the beginning as you're developing it.
It's very good. We always say follow the pathway where you are in the sickness or not sickness, and then apply proportionality for the value. But we are going now, imagine we have the DTX. This is like a story we are telling today. We managed to prove the value, and now we go there to market. So, tough question for you. I wanted to ask you a very specific thing. How can we make digital therapeutics more adoptable? And this is as opposed to reimbursed. They are being reimbursable in some systems, and people are not having any of it. So how can we get doctors to prescribe them and patients to adhere to them?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew. This is something we're trying to figure out at the moment, and we spent the best part of the last 18 months working on. Just for a little bit of context, like I said earlier, we provide digital therapeutics to people with tinnitus. It's mainly in the form of psychological therapies. Most of you here will probably know that there's no cure for tinnitus. There's nothing that can be done even to relieve it in most cases. But I would describe where we are now as having product consumer fit. So if you take commercialization out of the picture, if you just give our product to somebody struggling with tinnitus and tinnitus-related distress, we can do a very good job. We can give them a lot of value. But therein kind of lies the problem, and I think something that was said earlier about quantifying value in a B2B sense, quantifying value and value-based pricing models work great if you're in a B2B space, but we're not. We're D2C, so we try and sell straight to consumers. And we have two main problems that I've spent the last, the best part of 2 years working on. The first one is that consumers don't like paying for digital health. And that's just a straightforward, fact of the matter. Certainly in the UK, where we have a public health system, they're not used to paying for healthcare. And if they are used to paying for digital products, it's Netflix for £10 a month, Spotify for £10 a month. Now, like I said earlier, we have product consumer fit. We can vastly improve the quality of lives of our customers, and we can do a huge amount for them. Watching 4 seasons of Downton Abbey doesn't necessarily provide the same amount of value to that customer, but we're still compared. And so when we're an app-based product for the most part, but so when we throw up a paywall and it's £9.99 or $20.99 or £50 a month, those are the comparisons we're faced against. And it's just very, very hard psychologically to overcome that for our customers. And it's very tough to be in our situation when a lot of our customers might go to, say, an audiology service and pay €3,500 for, say, a tinnitus masker. And that's basically a modified hearing aid that would provide the sounds of the sea or white noise or something. It's a piece of hardware. They can get it from a physical store, and they can talk to a real person. There's very little evidence behind it. The European management guidelines are nice guidance. None of those guys will support sound therapy or tinnitus maskers, but it's very, very easy to convert people with tinnitus maskers. Digital therapeutics, what we provide, psychological therapy, vast amount of evidence, but the customers don't necessarily experience it like that. I often think of it like trying to sell cholesterol-lowering drugs, or I mean, when I was a practicing doctor, just trying to get compliance with things like type 2 diabetes medications and cholesterol-lowering medications is very, very difficult because they don't experience the value in quite the same way. So that's the first problem we have, is they just don't want to pay. The second problem is that we have a graduation effect. So we sort of have two teams at Otto that we try desperately to merge and work together, but they almost have different end goals. We have a therapy and a product team whose job it is to habituate people as fast as possible and get them off the platform and get them out. And then we have a growth team and a marketing team whose job it is to retain people and keep them on the platform, right? So we're a subscription-based product. And those two things just kind of don't come together very well. And that's something that is pretty tough to overcome. And like I said, any solutions, let me know, because we're working on it.
Thank you so much, and also for being so honest. But I think this panel is not about, even though I have my pink suit today, it's not about putting the pink glasses, but actually about nailing what the problem is, and maybe we can jointly come up with some solutions. Because the thing is, in these new fields, the sector is still trying to define how to pay for precision care and precision medicine. So it's not going to be a black and white, but startups that are bringing solutions that have clinical utility are needed. They need to buy time and find a way to do it. So this is the opening of the second part, because we want to leave with some pragmatic tips, And my question is a reflection of headlines. Everybody knows what happened to Pilar Therapeutics. Yep, direct-to-consumer product is no longer here. But for instance, last week, Hinge Health, yes, has announced that they're going to go IPO. They're valued at $6 billion. They use an integrated system with Brick, with therapists, on a B2B model. What I'm saying is, even though the B2B model might not be for everybody, there are other models other than direct-to-consumer or product PDT. So I wanted to ask you, what are the business models you have seen that are working at the moment?
Yeah, good question. Look, I think when you look at B2B, you're looking at real patients, right? And you need to have your, let's call it clinical champion, or you need to have your kind of, authority that is through which you're actually commercializing that. So if you're doing it through physiotherapists, or if you're doing it through diabetologists, or if you're doing it through cardiologists, you're talking about delivering a clinical product, but you're actually negotiating and doing business with the departments or the hospital, right? So that B2B, you need to understand there are still layers within that. On a D2C level, I mean, as George mentioned, it's going to be a different kind of product, right? So for you to have that defined in your head, it can be tough. The other one you can actually think about is how do you kind of nest these models? For example, if you're doing something B2G, right, where there are certain public health initiatives, right? Can you actually contract directly with a government? And then, through your channel, that can be a health institute, for example, right? How do you bring the solution ultimately to the user, that is the patient, but you as a business are not depending on the patient to pay you?
In that, you mean population health?
Population
programs.
health, correct.
Block, contrast, population health. Yeah, that's very, very good. Any?
I think, for me, where I've seen it be successful is using a range of different strategies. So it is not just focusing on D2C or B2B. It is thinking about the different use case scenarios for different people, and that goes in your development model.
The examples of success that I look up to, like HIMS, I guess, and to a more controversial extent, Cerebral. So those were the guys that were selling ADHD medications out in America. I think they've been sued into oblivion now, but they were very successful for a time. Basically, they've they've partnered digital therapeutics with a real physical product, right? It's coming with some kind of pharmacological intervention, some piece of hardware, and I just think that allows you to get over that psychological barrier that consumers have, that this is just an app, this is just a website or whatever. So I think that's probably essential. I think Noom is maybe the exception. I think those guys are doing amazingly well. I don't know if they have like a physical product alongside what they do. But yeah, HIMS and Cerebral have, well, you know, the proof's in the pudding.
Yes, that thing, the Ancora with hardware is very underrated. Hardware and software are a magic combo. Another one, you know, as well, you know. But I still go back to Nikita because you work for insurance. How can we get insurance to cover for something like tinnitus that is where the demographics do not, I mean, you don't have to talk on behalf of Vitality and talking on all the sector, because where really DTX play an important role is to provide access to specific groups that don't have anything at the moment, but then insurance will only cover mass population, solutions. So how do we do this?
I think that's one of the biggest problems. Whilst the field is very much growing, I think actually the volume and the market share is actually still pretty low. And so getting enough demand to service a large population is very, very hard. I think for us, we're really moving away from thinking about very specific conditions. We're thinking about what our outcomes are, what our customer experience is across end-to-end kind of pathways. And for us, these digital therapeutics need to be integrated into the pathway, and it needs to be driving a specific outcome. And that doesn't have to be a medical outcome. And often it can be something that is undertreated rather than treated. It is about giving excellent quality rather than saying, you know, for example, with ADHD, the traditional pill, it is an adjuvant, a companion that drives better outcomes rather than a single outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. Got 4 minutes, but before we open to the public, I got a tricky question that it can be answered by any of you or by any member of the public. Imagine we go through the friction, we get sales traction or mass adoption, whatever that means in health tech, and all of a sudden you get thousands of patients subscribing to your app. Who is going to fulfill all that? I mean, how do we deal with the last foot to the patient? Because it's not like you take a pink sheet, you go home, and that's... I mean, this is something that we also need to figure collectively. It's a supply chain or after-sales issue because we are not pharma. We don't have the supply chain. So the question is, what can we do? Anybody would like to provide some?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, insofar as you're partnering or being provided by the clinician, right, I would say that the onus is on them, right, to assess the outcome and actually, in a positive way. I'm not burdening them. I'm saying, you know, if there is anyone that close to the patient, in that case, that would be the clinician. If you're really going more for a preventive, preclinical, then you internally have to have your quality control. What George is mentioning, right, that clash between wanting someone on the platform, for example, versus wanting to cure whatever ails them, right? And that can be a tricky challenge. But on a clinical sense, I think the clinician ultimately needs that accountability.
I think that's hard to sell to a clinician from a time and effort perspective. I get it. That's where we want to be, where the future is, but selling that to an overworked, understaffed.
So you may need to provide them with the tools not to overload them, right? So it needs to come it's a tick-off, right? You need to say, it will help you, it will cost you some effort, but on the other hand, it saves you this and this time on delivering the regular care, right? So reduce the visits, but yes, do control those extra patients. 5 minutes versus 5 times 45, for example.
We got time for a quick question, if anybody would like to.
Yeah, thank you for a wonderful panel. My question is to Jose. Can you give clear examples of where, either where you've gotten a reimbursement done or where you are partnering with such a clinician that you just described? Yeah.
Sure, thank you for the question. So we're a Dutch startup, right? So we're now expanding into the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi. In the Netherlands, so we started in the employer health segment, which is a very much D2C out-of-pocket expenditure model. We used this to produce the evidence to actually move towards, there's a certain program in the Netherlands that is for kind of primary to meet secondary prevention, so people at risk with overweight and cardiovascular risk or people with obesity. We've used our evidentiary collection from the employer health programs to do this sort of assessment with the Dutch FDA equivalent to get that program now on the sufficient evidentiary threshold and moving now into the contracting phase with insurance. Again, this is a very specific to Netherlands model. It is not present in a lot of other European countries. DIGA could be the closest one for this. In countries like Abu Dhabi, for example, there we're going B2G, where there is a whole health tech and evidentiary assessment, and there the payer would then be the government. So depending on who your target payer is, you can actually think about how to do that go-to-market.
Thank you. I think we are a bit getting there over time, but I always say, I would like to thank, the panelists, of course. If this was a publication tomorrow, like Malta MedTech, I would like to always come out with some headlines, but I mean, quoting Nikita is about clinical effectiveness and proportionality of what you claim. Say and prove what you claim on the, on the thing. Going, to Jose is about where are you on the pathway. Prevention has 3 or 4 stages. People sometimes forget we are the same person. We just have different condition. Yeah. So we follow Harald's, like that. And then going back to George, I think it's like he. The patient will not pay in a lot of our markets. Forget about it. I know people who wait for 8 months to have one appointment. It's not that they cannot afford £100, but so we need to figure out who is going to pay for that, who's going to pay for prevention, population health. Think in your market and adapt to that. Because the thing with digital therapeutics, when it comes to commercialization, we have to think 3 different things. Like the market at the moment is going from medicine to digital health. And that's already creating a lot of friction. How we are delivering healthcare through digital motorways. But digital therapeutics is not even that. It goes beyond to the next stop. It's a new way to practice medicine, and it's going to take a long time till this become a clinical practice. So we collectively need to find a way to buy time and to find a way to pay these companies that are bringing much necessary treatments that are here right now. But with that, thank you very much, and then thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, everyone.